All right.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Know Your MIP call with HATS protocol. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I'm one of the governance facilitators here at MakerDAO. I'm joined by some awesome people from HATS, as well as the general maker community. And we're here to talk about kind of the MIP93, how HATS can be incorporated in Maker, and get some feedback from the community as well. So before we get too deep into it, I guess I'll pass the mic over to Hatstein. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves, and yeah, we'll start there.
Awesome. Thank you, Peyton. My name is Nick. I go by Ninty Nick online. I'm joined here by Spencer Graham and David Ehrlichman, who are kind of the inceptors of the project. And yeah, just jump right into it. I'd prefer to keep the this like super conversational, so I'll share kind of a high level, go over a couple slides about like kind of how we think about it and what HATS is useful for, and then please interrupt with any questions that you have, and we can kind of go do deep dives into aspects of the protocol, the code, how we're going to actually implement it via a maker spell as you guys see fit. So I'll share my screen here to start. Can you see that okay? MIP93?
Yeah, looks great.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we've been working on this with Peyton for the last few months. Originally started here with the kind of utilizing hats as an idea. Talked about basically the concept of bringing the single source of truth of roles for Maker on chain, and actually owned by the DAO. So instead of having it in kind of the Miro board that was linked from the work that SES did, or having it stored in Discord or kind of like in text, actually tokenizing individual roles and giving the whole DAO the power to continue adding roles to the tree via new hats tokens. So just to give you a little bit of context of how that works, I know I presented this last week, but to give you our highest level framing, when we talk about hats, we talk about how do we help DAOs get things done, and really that's the balance between like all of the benefits that DAOs give you, like decentralization, um, leveraging a network that can scale faster than hierarchies, being able to solve complex problems um, with uh, responsibility and accountability that is really hard to measure and account for in DAOs today. So some of the problems that we see across the board are just a lack of clear roles. Maker, I think, is kind of an outlier in that there's already some clear roles: core unit facilitators, people who are participating, delegates. But making that actually legible on chain and owned by the DAO is a key problem that we want to solve. And then making so that DAO votes don't need to happen for every single decision, especially when they're not needed. So how much autonomy does an individual person have, and how do we hold them accountable to using that authority responsibly? And also, again, make sure that that's on chain. So three key features of hats. The first one is that they are governed by the DAO, so they're role bound as opposed to soul bound tokens, which means that they can be transferred by the DAO, or the ability to create them and mint them and revoke them is something that's actually delegatable within the protocol. But the person who has the hat, we call them the hat wearer, is not able to transfer the hat. So you can't, just like if you worked for a company, you can sell your job title. You can't go on OpenSea and sell your hat token. They have a specific scope of authority, so they're plugged into token gates like Guild XYZ or Collabland, in order to give you access to specific platforms that are associated with the token ID of your particular hat. So if you have, the growth core unit, facilitator hat, then that's going to, you will use Guild to plug that into specific Discord roles, multi-sig signing authority, and be able to make sure that anyone who has the hat in the future would have those same authorities. And it really makes sure that the DAO has basically control or like the ultimate revocation ability of any authorities that are delegated to individuals or small groups. And then last, it's built for automation. So one of the coolest parts about hats is that you can bring your own logic to determine when someone has a hat or doesn't have a hat. Basically, we call this eligibility, but you could say, okay, if this person has a certain amount of MKR in their wallet, or MKR delegated to them, or they have participated in the last N of M votes, make sure, automatically grant their hat. Or if they haven't signed a multi-sig in the last 60 days, then automatically revoke their hat. That's the type of logic that we think is going to make DAOs increasingly automated. And we're already starting to see interesting ways that we could kind of do that within the Maker ecosystem using staked MKR. But this is totally bring your own logic. So anything that you want to use from on-chain data as criteria for granting or revoking hats, totally possible within the protocol. And I already mentioned some of these, but just as a mental model, we kind of think of a hat as a job in a box, where once the DAO gives a contributor a hat, they have everything they need to get work done. So access to Discord roles like via guild, access to multi-sig signing via Zodiac. We've done stuff like voting weight and snapshot. We have kind of a hacked solution to posting to Twitter via having a hat. Accountability, because your hat can be revoked, or in another case we're working on right now, slashing like staked ETH that someone put up to say that they were going to get a particular piece of work done. And then obviously compensation can be associated with having a hat in your wallet. There's more I want to say, but I'll pause there just to check the chat. Yep, so they are not soul bound. You can revoke them. They can be revoked by the DAO, and they can be renounced by the person who has it in their wallet. So you can't transfer it. You can't like sell it for ETH or send it to another wallet of yours or send it to someone else. But you can send it to the burn address, and then the DAO can move them around. They're modified ERC 1155s. We modified the balance of. We modified the transfer function. Got it. Okay. Happy to answer any follow-up questions if you have more there too. Thanks for asking. I want to show you guys two more things quickly. So this is the contract on Gurley testnet. I'll drop the URL in the chat. And here there are a couple of, yeah, exactly. Nice, Code Knight. You're right on. And then also the other thing I want to share is that we have this early draft of a guide on how to use hats written by one of our contributors, Maurice. And this goes through basically the couple of functions that I'm going to show you about how to use hats protocol. So whenever you get started with hats, you have to mint a top hat. That is basically the root node of a hats tree. And then every hat can create and mint child hats below it. So the top hat, you just send it to the address. You might use the pause proxy here, or if you have a core unit multi-sig, you might use the core unit multi-sig here with the intention to later kind of graft the tree that you create onto the larger maker tree. That's one of the features that we've just been working on recently, is the ability to kind of combine branches into larger trees when that's appropriate, so that people can kind of get started more easily. In any hat, you can always include details. Oftentimes we see this as an IPFS link to like a job description or even a forum post, or you can just put a name here, or if you want, you can put custom JSON. And then the image URI, since they're sort of like NFTs, include any image, whatever you want. Any hat that doesn't have an image will default to its admin's image. And if the admin doesn't have an image, it'll default to the hat's logo. So you kind of mint the top hat to the DAO, or to the whatever is going to manage the root of your branch, and then from there you can create hats. This would be like creating a child hat off of the top hat. You use the top hat ID as the admin. Again, details here, you can include IPFS link. You have a max supply. So sometimes, a lot of times, since it's ERC 1155, you have one of ones, but sometimes you might have like 5 multi-sig signers on something, 5 core unit, team members. Eligibility is what I was mentioning earlier. Is the address that you use to revoke the hat under certain conditions. So this can be smart contract address, or it can be just an EOA, a multi-sig, or a DAO that is manually able to revoke the hat. And then toggle is similar to eligibility, except instead of removing it from a particular address, it turns the entire hat on or off. So you could say that we have this hat for just for this quarter. At the end of the quarter, automatically turn the hat all of these hats off, and that's just like an interesting way to do expiration. Mutability is if you're creating a hat that you think is going to change over time, your hat can be mutable. But we think that generally hats are going to move toward becoming immutable in the long term. So this is kind of like draft, almost like draft mode. And then once you get solid on what you need your hat structure to be, then you change immutable to false, and then it kind of creates a more solid form. And then again, you get the image. So you create the hat, and then once you create it, you get the token ID of the hat out of this hat's contract, and then you use the mint hat function with the hat ID and then the person who you want to be wearing the hat. I can get into how hats are revoked and things like that, but I think I'll just pause there to see what questions have come up so far.
So, well, happy to jump in with a couple of straw mans if you don't mind, Nick. So I was wondering if you could kind of go over then what the advantage or kind of what the difference is between kind of like a hats roll and just a badge, right? Like I think this kind of ties in well to the kind of soulbound discussion and stuff we were having earlier as well.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great question. Oftentimes, badges are pretty new primitive as well, and POAP kind of started as a badging primitive. There's some stuff that POAP doesn't do based on the way that their token IDs work. So we've seen like a bunch of new badging solutions come out in the last 6 to 12 months, and those are really interesting to basically have like a stored piece of data about your address, something that you accomplished, something that you well, I'm happy to get into that too. Something that you have accomplished, or something that an event that you went to, some work that you did, some membership that you've held for some period of time. I really like that those are soul bound, and that they aren't revocable. They're not transferable by the DAO, because they're really a data primitive. You own your own data about the things that you've done. Hats is really exploring the design space of roles, and roles are transferable. They're something that can be removed, and it's important because roles are basically delegated authority and accountability. And accountability is a very special type of authority, which is why we have a tree of hats in the first place. So I would say that hats are not badges because they can be moved. They're not a data primitive, but they use data primitives like badges, especially in the automatic granting and revocation. So you can imagine, having a baseline requirement of anyone who's going to wear a maker hat to have a certain number of badges that include contributions to the DAO, participation in votes, showing up to town halls, and maybe you accumulate 3 different badges of certain types, and then use that as eligibility for getting baseline eligibility for getting a hat. That's pretty much the biggest difference. I think they're super composable, play well together.
Right on. I think that's a cool way to think about it, and definitely kind of got me further down the issue just in terms of how I approach it from a governance standpoint. And I think it's probably clear to most people, at least in the room, who are familiar with this. But the fact that it's a deployed contract on the Etherscan, you have the guide, really adds to that decentralized governance aspect to it as well. Like, I think what got me most excited about this was just the idea that it's just another Lego. It's another tool that's out there for building on top of governance, which means that there are a lot of potential angles you can take this. And I think that's kind of what we're going to get into at the backside of the call. But before we did, I kind of just wanted to see if you had any thoughts there in terms of on the governance and why you're spending your time working on this, and kind of why you think this is an important problem to be dedicating so much time to.
Yeah, it's and maybe Spencer and David can jump in on this as well. But I'll just start off by saying that we've been in DAOs for the last 2 years. Spencer's coming up toward 3 years, and we have gone through various waves of ERC20 based voting, MakerDAO share based voting, new NFT based mechanisms, and it seems like there's a lot of interesting ways of divvying up the natural power of the DAO. So like the natural power being like the control of the top level governance surface, and Maker, that's the pause proxy, and in other DAO contracts that there's other top level, like a compound governor Bravo or a Moloch DAO. They both have that kind of top level governance surface where voting happens. But there's so much inefficiency, specifically around, and I'll maybe can nerd snipe Spencer a little bit with this. Is Spencer just coined the term, the accountability commons. So DAOs are really good at solving tragedy of the commons problems. That's like one of the most interesting things that DAOs are useful for, and why I think that it can be so impactful in the world. But there's, in terms of getting things done, like turning resources and people's time and skills into deliverables and achievement of goals, even if we know which direction we want to head, there's a challenge around understanding who is actually going to get which thing accomplished, and what penalties and rewards we can create for people as incentives for them to accomplish those things. So that I think that DAOs are going to be the most efficient organizations that humanity has ever created, and this seems like a key building block to overcome some of the challenges that we've seen in DAOs over the last few years. So that's why it's so exciting to me. And Maker specifically is one of the most mature and interesting DAOs that I've seen and gotten to participate in, kind of like developing. So it's just super exciting for me, and I think for our team to be jamming on this with y'all.
Yeah, go for it, Spencer. Yeah, you and David, feel free to take a stab as well.
Yeah, Nick is always good at nerd sniping me. He knows what I don't know, knows the sniper corridors that I'll be down or something. But I feel like basically I agree with everything that Nick said, and I'll add that as somebody who is, like, I expect everybody here who is really inspired by and almost like a maximalist for real DAOs, I have observed a tendency among the broader DAO space to make a trade-off between getting stuff done and being a real DAO that that has kind of saddened me over the last couple of years. I had DAOs like Maker and like DXDAO have kind of held true to what real DAOs should be, but I think that has come with some trade-offs that everybody feels. For a long time, I was a core contributor to DAO House, and we were kind of on that same path, and we felt a lot of the same trade-off over some challenges being able to put individual people as create individual responsibility for people, which is historically the best way to actually ensure that something really gets done, something important gets done. And so where I came from with hats is trying to figure out a way to do that without sacrificing the things that make DAOs really special, which is their DAO-ness, which is their collective control over what's happening over the shared resources. And so that's where, at least for me, hats really shines, is enabling DAOs to not have to make that trade-off nearly as much, and to get stuff done without losing their DAO-ness, losing their shared control.
It's really cool. Thank you, Spencer. And then don't feel like you have to, but if you do have anything to add, David, I'll give you a chance before I start sharing here.
Thanks, Peyton. Yeah, hey everybody. Just one quick thing I wanted to add before we get into the details of possible implementations to keep in mind is that hats are really designed to evolve with your DAO as it grows. We know these structures, these organizing structures are emergent. We can't plan it all out in advance. One of the key things of hats is that hat trees can be linked together. They can be grafted onto another. And so what that enables is, you have your primary MakerDAO tree where it's on-chain verifiable, more solid, but then individual core units or small groups or even individuals could be experimenting with hats on their own, defining roles, creating structures for their group. And then only at the point where it feels right or there's some stability there, then they could submit a proposal to link that their branch to the maker tree. So just wanted to share that. Don't need to feel like we need to figure it all out in advance. You can really work with hats as your organization evolves.
Right on, that's great, and touched on a number of points I think we'll probably highlight in this section as well. Cool. Let's see if I can not botch the screen share here. Looking okay. Okay. So just kind of wanted to talk about like timeline, because as we were first getting to know each other with hats, right? We were at I believe, the start of the endgame vote. Nick and I met together in Bogota, and it was kind of this question of like, okay, well, we know that this is a super useful primitive. We know like there are a ton of ways we can apply this to Maker, but like, how are we going to deal with endgame and the shift and what that means for us? And in many ways, that's still a question I think we're answering, but I think we're getting better at answering. So kind of just wanted to give the audience an overview here. Say like, all right, so the goal is to kind of get the top level hat implemented in February of this year. And that would be done through PE and kind of through the executive auditing schedule. We've been talking with them for quite a bit now, and still trying to work out the best way to do that in a way that minimizes dev resources, right? Like, I think what's so cool about this primitive is it is so permissionless. So really, we just kind of want a way to get this in the hands of the DAO while still giving the DAO the authority over it, so it can use it for like official structures, but without putting any unnecessary red tape once we get those structures up and in place. So that gives us this like really great runway during the pre-in-game constitution phase, where we can be testing out use cases, applying it in a number of different ways, and really just seeing like how our community is finding the most value. Because I think there's a lot of different ways we can use this primitive, and they all kind of make sense to me from a governance perspective in terms of getting to consensus better, of giving different ways and more power to contributors to kind of manage their experience and how they contribute to the DAO. But the point is that in that time before the full constitution drops, we'll kind of be able to figure out exactly where the core value is for Maker in this primitive, and then hopefully get it into that toolkit for decentralized governance. Because I think it's going to become quite clear through what we're going to share and start talking about next, and all the concrete ways that you can apply the protocol. That sub-DAOs are kind of the domain that are going to benefit hugely from this. So we kind of just want to figure out some best practices and add that to our toolkit so that when we're launching these sub-DAOs, they have access to the best governance tools and ways to empower their own contributors. Okay, so we talked about a lot of different use cases, right? Like the post that kind of kicked this off was me just real minimally thinking like, okay, like what's the least amount of work we could do in terms of like setting up a tree that would be useful. And that was when that original post came of just envisioning, okay, let's take the work that Retro did in terms of mapping our core unit wallets and facilitator addresses, and let's actually like put that on chain with a recognizable token. And I still think this is useful for facilitators that want to opt into it. I still think it's great. But also there are a ton of other ways that we can be using this. And our talk for the MIP was kind of like, okay, how do we get the baseline? How do we get the top hat installed so that we can then move on to kind of letting people play around in the sandbox, so to speak. So a couple of things off the bat is token gated chat. We know a couple of delegates, I believe, even that are on this call, worked pretty hard this year for getting Guild installed in our Discord server, which does allow for some token gated chat, which is awesome. But I think the idea of role tokens really kind of expands the ability for that, because not only can we kind of programmatically set up chats that are looking for fixed things like opening of a vault or other Maker Core related businesses, but we can do it based on DAO role, right? So we can add people to official chat channels, mandated actors meetings, that sort of thing, based on governance votes that are taking place. Additionally, since it is an 1155, the ability to use snapshot polling is really great. A lot of people are always asking like, oh, why does Maker use snapshot? And there's like a complicated technical history there for how we ended up where we are. But one kind of core problem is just like, okay, well, with how the IOU tokens are structured, it's really hard to just spin up a Maker snapshot instance and get some accurate feedback. So if we were to add the role of delegate and send out that token to all the delegates, you could instantly kind of pull delegates for consensus, get them to participate in a snapshot poll that anyone with a ENS domain could set up. Likewise, we can start toying around with arbitration models. Patrick on the GNR call last week mentioned facilitator voting, kind of that specific use case of when we had to install an interim facilitator. We had to do voting by Discord because that was like the most secure and verifiable way where we could get in touch with everybody and kind of keep hold of the system. And I think that's kind of the shortcut for me, is that a lot of what we can use hats for is taking our Web 2 like crutches and bringing us into Web 3. Because we have a great group of people that really care about decentralization and kind of resiliency in our products, yet we're relying on a lot of social structures that kind of use Web 2 tools to verify legitimacy when we could be using the blockchain. So yeah, the obvious other one to mention there is multi-sig use. Hats is really cool in that you could spin it up and actually have signers be people who hold the hats role token. So this is something we've struggled management wise with in the DAO. I think it's fair to say it's like anytime we have to spin up a multi-sig or do a new budget, it's very ad hoc. People have their own procedures. This could be a tool that would allow us to do it programmatically. So yeah, hopefully just kind of illustrating the point there that there's like a lot of different directions and a lot of different fields that we can be experimenting with over this next year to kind of find exactly where we as a community get the most value add. And then as we transition, once the Constitution comes out next year, it'll be just kind of pasting that over into the relevant areas. You heard me mention arbitration scope earlier. Patrick, my other co-facilitator at GovAlpha, has come up with a really neat MVP design for how we could do some arbitration, basically like a simple way with kind of judges, for lack of a better term, to handle disputes. And this is something that like Hats is great for, because you can set someone up for a vote in a sub-DAO, right? And say, okay, well, if someone's voted in a sub-DAO, their address receives this token, they become an arbiter, and they have to follow all these rules, including stake and all the cool stuff Patrick has come up with. The neat thing there is that gives the way to actually manage it too, from a decentralized org perspective, right? Because it's easy on a social level to say like, oh, okay, these people are deciding things. But this will allow us to put it on chain and actually have people put it on their address sign publicly for everyone when they're taking a stance on a dispute. So yeah, we see simple voting and meta delegation probably being a use there. Treasury management for the multi-sig bit I mentioned earlier. Role tracking, pretty obvious, as well as just general community management with Discord role functions. One neat onboarding thing I did with when I was learning the Hats protocol was setting up with them, getting my hat minted on the test network, and then getting added to their Discord based on having that role. So that was a really neat onboarding experience, and one I think that we could kind of bring to sub-DAOs, and might be particularly helpful in in-game rollout. Cool. So I think that kind of does it in terms of slides. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then maybe we can open it up to question and answer and dive maybe a little deeper into the particularly interesting aspects that you guys found. Like I said, I kind of just wanted to highlight a bunch and see what sparked people's imagination, and maybe we can explore some of those. Yeah, I see some questions getting answered in chat there. I might repeat them out for the recording later, but first I see a hand from 3F Good Meta, Frank, one of our delegates. Want to take it away, Frank?
Yeah, hey guys, thanks. It's Frank from Flip Flop Flop Delegate LLC. I had spotty internet connection, so sorry if you already answered this, but I have a lot of experience with joining Discord communities, and one thing that I hate, not that I hate, but I always get nervous when I do it, is connecting, your wallet to Collabland and all that good stuff. I know they're trying to do a lot of good with Collabland and others alike. But another thing that I've noticed that turns me off as a user is that I'll join a community and somebody will be, already collected like 10 different badges, or in this case, hats, right? And then I can't get into a certain, like you said, gated community. And I get turned off and I just completely leave the Discord. So I just wanted to get an idea of what the experience has been for you guys. And as far as end user experience, and hoping that retail comes back to this ecosystem in the future, how are someone who's just joined the ecosystem, how easy is it to use some of the tooling and not get turned off and just walk away from a sub-DAO? Because I think sub-DAOs are going to need communities. And if you gate them early on, I think you're going to have some issues with getting sub-DAO communities to grow. But that, that's just my opinion, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I can take this one. I think there is an important and meaningful distinction between like a broader community and contributors that are being given explicit responsibility and associated authorities. What we don't have broadly speaking, within DAOs today really is a way to find like a fine-grained way to distinguish between those two things. We kind of either do like sort of like very like brute force or sort of blunt kind of one size fits all token gating, or we don't do anything. I think what we are hoping to see, and what we've started to see with some of the people that who are playing around with hats, is that they're starting to create multiple levels that enable a DAO to more naturally distinguish between people who have authority and who've been given responsibility and the broader community, and create a clearer pathway from just entering the community for the first time and kind of earning your way by demonstrating your alignment, credibility, skill set, et cetera, earning your way towards a position where you can actually get more responsibility and authority. So we don't want, I don't want to see people using hats to like keep people out of their community. I want to see people using hats to give people a better pathway to being a more meaningful member of their community.
Very cool distinction. Thanks, Spencer. I did want to highlight some of the back and forth here because I think it is a cool bit of the technology, but I'll go for Juan's question before I do that. So Juan was asking in the chat, would this work with / improve the auditor's MIP? And yeah, auditing framework is one of the things we immediately jump to in terms of how hats could be useful, because you know, like there's kind of just the standard thing of like, oh, cool, we can take who our auditors are, put them on chain, make it, you know, more visible, that sort of thing. But there's also like the cool eligibility bit. Like, so one of the things that really enticed me was this idea that like, in order to maintain the hat, you could set special rules to it. So maybe if you haven't signed off on a multi-sig transaction in, you know, the last 180 days, maybe you no longer retain your auditor hat, or maybe you have to sign off on these things that are going forward. So I think like not only is it like a kind of a natural fit to these structures that we inherently want to build for auditing within the DAO, but I think it also kind of allows us to have that missing teeth, where right now we set rules, we try to follow them, and then it's like, okay, well, the rule doesn't go through, and then you kind of have to base it on social structures, which and many times comes down to myself or Patrick having to tell somebody no, right? Having to say, hey, well, we're the governance facilitators, we're in charge, it's our job to tell you that we don't think this is allowed, which is always going to be a centralizing factor. So one of the neat things with this technology is it can allow us to kind of encode the rules and encode some of the protections that we naturally would rely on the social layer to enforce into the permissions. So yes, I think the auditors MIP and that framework in general is probably like the prime area that personally I would start on, but it's also like I'm a governance nerd, you know, like that's the area I'm interested in. Like I think people who are interested in delegation can find cool ways to broaden the scope there, and people are interested in having like more engagement and more fulfilling chat spaces. Like I'm sure they'll come up with ways to like earn different ranks of chat and engage there. Like it really is a building block for us to say, okay, what matters to us as a community, and what would we like to make a little more transparent and a little more enforceable on chain. Cool. I might toss the mic to you for one moment here while I ask for clarification. Nick, kind of want to go over that back and forth on the safe addresses and kind of the idea of the token be able to move. Yeah, go for it.
For sure. So Good News asked, does it work with safe addresses as holders of hats? And the answer to that is absolutely. Hats are modified ERC 1155 tokens, and they can be held by any address, EOAs, multisigs, or DAOs, and they can even be held by, worn by other smart contracts. We see a world where DAOs become increasingly automated by delegating authorities to small groups, individuals, even sub DAOs or meta DAOs, and as well as contracts that are kind of representing different workflows or logic that automatically gets things done on behalf of the DAO. And we, as David mentioned earlier and Spencer mentioned in the chat, we have this kind of like emergent structure that is possible to, I think any network, David has written a lot about this. Any network is going to have more emergent structure than kind of a planned top-down structure. DAOs are definitely a category of networks, and we have the opportunity to kind of evolve the role structure of hats via moving the hat from an individual to a multi-sig to a DAO, or even kind of like creating additional child hats within a hats tree to increasingly decentralize the authority in a very DAO native ethos using hats. We're really strong believers in that, and we think that's how that flexibility is going to be super important to DAOs that choose to use hats.
So thanks for addressing that. Wanted to cover another question from Juan in the chat, who is asking about the implementations in terms of like, what are we actually trying to add in, and how is that going to bring value? So the kind of neat thing about this is like, you don't actually have to add in much to kick off the sandbox, right? Like all you need is that top hat and a way to add hats underneath. The kind of annoying, I don't know, annoying's wrong word, but with maker governance, right? Like it can be quite slow. It can be hard to build consensus. These aren't problems limited to us, but they are ones that we feel acutely. So one problem with just setting up the top hat and leaving it up to MKR voters to add subsequent roles is then you'd have to kind of go through a governance measure for anything you wanted to set up. So kind of based on that, the idea behind this MIP and what we're trying to accomplish with it is this kind of motive of like, you can build your own hat that you see is useful. You can test it, play around with it on Gorilla, and then you can apply through this MIP to make it a part of the official maker tree. And sometimes that's easy. You can just add it in through systems downline. Sometimes we'll need governance votes, and yeah, that will kind of be hammering that bit out as we see how people use it. But in terms of like how we can instantly start grabbing value with this, I know we for GovAlpha are going to be playing around with for our arbitration. We're actually going to see if we can set up the system that we have in mind and test it out on a test network. So that's like one direct way for value. A couple of the requests from delegates on our token gated chat we weren't able to do with the out of the box version of Guild. So we'll be able to add those in as well. Those are kind of like the instant like wins that I see. But kind of what I'm hoping to shepherd and to encourage to happen is that through our scope meetings, through working on creating the endgame scopes and the framework that'll kind of govern the DAO in the future, I'm hoping that people will try to experiment with building their own structure and seeing how they could use hats as a way to secure those roles that they make in it. In that way that like different parts of that tree can develop organically and be grafted on. But yeah, basically that's kind of how I see us starting and how I see this project evolving and adding value is just starting small and then experimenting with how we'd like to better manage our community. So we do have another question in the chat from Good News, who's asking, how does your project compare with Metropolis, formerly known as Orca Protocol, and what they've been doing with pods? Yeah, I don't know if you want to take that for the hat side, and maybe I can add in the end game side after that.
For sure. We get this question a lot. Jules and the team at Metropolis has been friends of ours, and we love what they're working on. I think a couple distinctions. One is just the level of opinionation of our approach is we try to design basically the best possible composable primitive for like governance Legos or structural Legos for DAOs. And that means that we made a lot of the pieces open-ended, including the person who wears a hat. Could be a multi-sig, could be a DAO. You could create a whole compound governor Bravo contract and make that kind of like wear one of the hats in your DAO. So that level of flexibility is important, just so that DAOs can build the right governance structure that they need in use case by use case example, and also so that it can change over time. Like the flexibility we talked about earlier for increased decentralization. I think Hats handles that a little bit better than pods. Pods are a great starting place, and their tools are composable with one another. So you can have pods that wear hats, or you can have pod members that wear hats within a pod. Very doable. And we're talking with them about an implementation for another project that y'all might know about. And I would say hats are really particularly useful because you can get them down to the individual level as well. So you have a one-of-one hat that represents a particular role, and you're giving that role to an individual, and that individual is accountable to getting a specific set of work done. So I would say that we differ slightly in saying that the atomic unit of work is really an individual getting things done, whereas Metropolis focuses on the atomic unit of work being a team and a collaboration within a team, which does have advantages as well, I would say.
Yeah, I always found that really cool because it's like, the ability to use roles means you can delegate not only to the pod but to the individual as well. Yeah, I just think it's really neat and kind of fits that DAO ethos of like one of many and kind of all the parts contributing to the idea of the whole. Yeah, makes sense. And kind of like we were saying with in-game, and as we transition to sub-DAO, it's like it just makes a lot of sense that there's going to be several different areas where sub-DAO might be able to apply it. So yeah, I think we're going to be in a really cool spot this year, seeing the different ways people are experimenting and finding value with it. Yeah, I don't know how I want to wax politically on the ideas of delegation and how it allows scale, but perhaps I'll spare you all on this Wednesday. With that, I'm noticing we are a few minutes away from the top of the hour here, so if you do have any last questions, comments, anything like that, now would probably be a good time to ask them. Yeah, really appreciate everyone coming out today. I might lob up a couple final softballs for you, Nick. Where can we find Hats right now, and what do you got going on?
Nice. Yeah, we've got the Hats protocol.xyz is our kind of homepage, just very blank right now. We have the Hats protocol GitHub, which I'll link here in the chat as well. It's just github.com/hats-protocol /hats-protocol again. And you can see the README, the early version of the docs. We are at Hats Protocol on Twitter. You can send us a DM or hit me up. I'm in the Maker Discord, NintyNick 2222, or just NintyNick on Telegram. I'm happy to answer questions and connect you with our team as needed. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you guys. As always, take a look at the forum. Keep an eye out for the latest votes and updates on this. Like I said, we'll be pushing this through hopefully some different implementations as well. So keep an eye on that for Maker governance. And we hope to be developing some exciting features for the whole DAO to be using this year. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Peyton. See you, everyone.
See you.